So, welcome everybody to this special living room conversation where we're going to talk about the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I was inspired to invite this panel of guests to participate in this conversation after hearing folks speak about the dimension of Dr. King's legacy that many of us know about, the I Have a Dream speech and the beloved community. But there's more to his legacy than we usually get taught in school or that usually gets discussed. In fact, at one point, he said that he feared that his dream had become a nightmare and that he was concerned that he may have integrated his people into a burning house. Living in a time where polarization has become a word that most people in this country know, um, we often wonder how far are we from that dream that he first talked about at that speech. And this panel today is just going to have an open discussion using the living room conversations framework to discuss this topic of Dr. King's legacy. And so we will begin with introductions. My name is Pedro Silva. I live in Colorado. I'm here because I believe that we cannot fix what we can't talk about. And so anytime I get a chance to be in a conversation with great minds, I just feel like that's one step in bringing the world together. And I've done many living room conversations. And now I'm going to invite Kareth to give her introduction and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Pedro. My name is Kareth Foster. I'm the CEO of Inversity Solutions, the creator of Inversity, and that's a methodology for taking the division out of diversity. That's the little definition. And my goal with the work that I do is creating spaces, brave spaces, where people can have true conversations about true diversity, true inclusion. And instead of it being a 2 steps forward, 10 steps back scenario, we actually do make progress. And we are able to have the uncomfortable conversations, but we can create environments of inclusivity and belonging that ultimately, bring about equity and equanimity. Oh, and I live in Plano and New York City.
Awesome.
Plano,
Uh,
Texas.
Wally.
Hello, my name is Wally Collins. I am a stand-up comedian, producer, author. Um, I thought we were going to talk about recipes, but no, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
I am very excited about this. Believe it or not, as a hobby of mine, I do study African American history, and this conversation about Dr. King. When I got invited by Kareth, I couldn't say yes fast enough. So thank you for the invite, and let's get started.
Awesome. Francis.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Francis Johnson. I live in Florida, just on the east side of Tampa, in a town called Sebring. I'm here. Pedro invited me. We were at the Inner Movement Impact Project monthly meeting, and the subject of Dr. King came up during the conversation, and I sent him a direct message saying, "Hey, I'd like to have a conversation after the meeting," and we did briefly, and he in turn invited me to participate in today's living room conversations, and looking forward to interacting with everyone here.
Awesome. Zadie.
Yes. Hi, my name is Zadie Crow Carnegie, and I am currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. In terms of what I spend my time doing, mostly I work as an editor for a health magazine, as well as a content writer for that magazine. I am a published author, and I spend a lot of time working with women's ministry. I have a women's ministry, and speak at churches here in Atlanta, back in London, etc. With regards to being here, Pedro was kind enough to invite me to join, and I figured if I got myself into the right company and listen to the discourse of people more knowledgeable than myself, I might gain a greater understanding of the issue that we're talking about today. I have always admired Dr. Martin Luther King, of course, although I am more leaning towards being, if I had to choose between him and anyone else, Malcolm X kind of person. I do believe very much in action. I am not a person who believes too much in sitting passively, despite my Christian worldview. So, I'm looking forward to being in your company today. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. And Sylvester.
Yeah, all right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sylvester Jones. Sylvester Jones Jr., actually. I have a son, he's the third, so I want to make sure that I represent him properly. I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, by way of Flint, Michigan. So I've only been in Kalamazoo for about 2 years now. Spent all of my life in the Flint area. And so I'm honored to be here. My work is that of a program officer for the Kalamazoo-based Fetzer Institute. I am a huge proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But more than that, I am a proponent of eliminating disparities. And so thrilled to be a part of this conversation. And certainly, I'm sure I will learn something along the way.
Awesome. So part of the living room conversations framework is that we have what we call conversation agreements. I call them a mini constitution, how we agree to be in relationship and conversation with one another as we go through the conversation. So I'm going to start off with the first conversation agreement, and I'll read the part in bold. And then as you feel led, someone can speak into the room with the next agreement, starting off with being curious and listen to understand.
I'll go next. Show respect and suspend judgment, which is very challenging in this day and age.
Note any common ground as well as any differences.
Be authentic and welcome that from others.
Be purposeful and to the point.
Wow, I'm a bit slow, aren't I? Own and guide the conversation.
So own and guide the conversation is my favorite one because to me it speaks into accountability. If you feel like something needs to be said, then say it. And take responsibility for your quality of participation. Awesome. So now we're going to get into the conversation rounds, which is round one, where you're invited to answer one or more of the following questions. I encourage folks to just answer one, and I'll read them out for folks who will view this later. The first question is, what sense of purpose, mission, or duty guides you in your life? The second one is, what would your best friend say about who you are and what inspires you? And then the third one is, what are your hopes and concerns for your community and or the country? So anyone as you feel led, answer one of those questions.
I'll start. What sense of purpose, mission, duty guides me in my life? I have a philosophy that I wrote a book about it. It's called You Never Know. I condense it to one word: you never know. That's my guide. Try it because you never know. Any goals, dreams, desires, I have to try because I don't want to be in my deathbed staring at my ceiling saying to myself, if I woulda, coulda, shoulda. And with that, I was an architect. I'm a musician. I'm a stand-up comedian, an actor, producer, author. And I did that by that mantra that my mother gave me. It says, you never know unless you try. And I'm so happy for that because I've learned so much. And, and by that philosophy, it brought me here to have this conversation about something I'm very, very passionate about African-American history. And so that's my philosophy in life is you never know, you never know.
I'll go next.
Okay.
I didn't kind of give the litany of things I've done. I'm also a stand-up comedian. That's how I know Wally very well. I started doing stand-up over 25 years ago. So yes, I was 5 when it happened. But I always wanted to be a beacon of light and truth. And that is what's guided me my entire life. It's why I got my degree in broadcast journalism. It's why I went into the media. It's why I left the media. It's why I wrote a book called You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy, because perfection is a lie, but happiness is as individual as we are. And there's a caveat that it's not a constant, but it is a choice. And I think that so much of us are caught up in this web of perfection where not only do we're driven to be perfect ourselves, even though we are naturally, but we strive for this idea of perfection that's unattainable. We also seek perfection in others. And I think that opens the door for a lot of the biases that we see happening across the globe. We want other people to be what we think they should be. And I think that is very much in line with Dr. King's message of seeing people, for the content of who they are. So, my life's philosophy is really, again, being the beacon of light and truth, but also my motto is laugh, think, grow. If we can laugh at something, we can get through it. And of course, through laughter comes a neutral space and an opening for people to be able to take information in, to let it marinate, to have a shift in mindset and ideas. And from that comes growth.
Awesome.
For myself, I do strongly believe that every individual is on this earth for a divine purpose and to fulfill a divine destiny. For me, every single individual that I meet becomes the universe, if you like, and becomes my cosmic reason for being, so that I strive always not just to be authentically me, but to be present, thoroughly present with that person in every moment that I live, and always conscious of the presence of the divine and how myself and whoever I'm interacting with are expressions of the divine. However you perceive the divine to be, you say source, you say Mother Earth. I don't know. Everybody has a different way. Earlier today, I said to a friend, whether you chant or you put out positive vibes or you pray, whatever it is that you do, be present with that in the moment, so that we're not living in the past and we're not living for the future, but we are in the moment. And so for me, for that means bringing my whole being to bear, so that when I interact with any person, any individual, I am giving all that I am, because I think that's what I'm here for. That has manifested, I suppose, in the work that I've done over the years. I am a barrister by training, and specialize in family law and criminal law. Some years later, when I got a bit lazy, I sort of shifted over to company law. I was trained by BBC Television as a producer, and so when I moved to Atlanta, I spent almost 10 years working with a small television station, making programs and being program director, all that side of things, alongside also pursuing my ministry goals, which is to pour into the life of everyone I come into contact with something positive, even if all it means it's that I see you, you are here, I acknowledge you with a smile, with a whatever and however I can acknowledge the fact that I am here and you are here too, and we're connected, and all of us are connected. And the obstacles we have to overcome is breaking down those barriers to connection. And so that is my philosophy on life. I view primarily through a lens of biblical truths, as in Christ Jesus and the principles that flow from him, but not limiting how I live those principles, or share that viewpoint, or embrace myself that I see in every person I come into contact with.
Thanks. Sylvester or Francis?
Yeah. Well, let me say I so appreciate this conversation, and thank you, Pedro, for inviting us to be a part of this. Really appreciate what Zadie says. Is that that the correct
Yes, it's correct.
pronunciation?
Yes, Zadie.
Really appreciate, yeah, Zadie. I really appreciate what you said, because I think there's a sense of peace that comes along with understanding our divine purpose.
Mhm.
And so I think we all um, should be seeking that peace, trying to understand why God allowed us to be living in this moment at this time and what our responsibility is. And I really do believe that when we are seeking that understanding from God, we do have a sense of peace that allows us to engage with people in an authentic way, in a loving way. And it allows us to engage with people, recognizing that our meeting them was not by accident.
Mhm.
And so recognizing that all of that is divine. And I think with that comes this understanding for me is that my relationship with the vertical should influence my horizontal relationships as well. And there's so much peace that goes along with that understanding. And I actually hope that others will embrace that understanding as well. I had a chance to meet Francis and Pedro both in New York a little over a year ago. And since that time, Pedro and I have kind of remained in conversation with each other. And I think it's that understanding that we have the relationship with the divine, and that influences how we connect with and relate to each other. And nothing, I would be super surprised if someone said to me that their interaction with Pedro was different from my interaction with him, and because of the peace and the relationship that Pedro has with the divine. And I really believe that we all should seek to have that kind of relationship again with the divine, so that we can connect with each other in a loving, authentic way. And so I just so appreciate you saying that, Zadie. And it, you just called out to my spirit to say that's what we all should be seeking for. And as we have this conversation about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, I am convinced that that is what animated him, that he was clear about who God had created him to be, and he was clear about the assignment that he had when he was here. And then if you any of his readings and listening to his speeches, it was clear that he knew what he was here for. And so yeah, so thank you for that. That's what I would offer.
So, Francis.
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. Anyway, I wanted to kind of there are three, but I want to kind of combine, two of them, the sense of, purpose and mission, and kind of the hopes and concerns, for the community. Growing up, one of the things that I'm thankful for is that I had, parents that were really concerned about what was going on in their world and time, because of the experiences they went through to be able to succeed, and they passed that on to me. And it was just they had a mission, and they passed that mission, so to speak, on to me, and to say that you always have to be better than the next person or the person you're competing with, because being Black, African American, that's just expected. You can't expect to be as good as that other person, because they'll get picked every time. So you always have to be better. And I had the experience in my life to be young enough. I was just about 4 or 5 years old. I went to the march with my father on my father's shoulders. And I'm desperately trying to find that picture, Pedro. I wanted to send it to you, my father's shoulders, at the Lincoln Memorial, because I grew up in Washington, right outside of Washington, D.C. So
Oh, wow.
that's something, that's where I grew up. I live in Florida now, but that experience, even though I was very, very young, it stayed with me until I really understood what it was all about. And as you know, as I was growing up and what was going on, in the civil rights movement and Dr. King and what he was doing, those are the things that my parents were trying to say. This is that mission. He has a mission. You need to fall into that and to bring it on to the next generation. And so I think it's very important never to lose what his mission was and carrying it on, because I think what he was doing, he was trying to pass it on to each generation, and we have to pass it on to the next generation, on and on and on, because we're never gonna win the fight unless we continue this. We need to continue this for perpetuity. But I think that is kind of my purpose and what I want to do, because I think as we as a community grow, it will help the country grow. Because right now we're in times that I'm old enough I've seen a lot transpire in over the years. And I've never seen a time like we have right now, the divisions that we have. And I think it's time we really need to kind of sit back and reflect and take the message that Dr. King, what he was all about, and we need to bring that back. We need to bring back a saner message now to move on.
Yeah. So I will briefly say what I am thinking about and my purpose. My purpose really is just to bring people together. I was fortunate enough to have a very diverse family, and it opened my heart up to lots of people from lots of different perspectives. And I used to think if I can get along with everyone, everyone can get along with each other. And I realized that we never got educated to have the conversations that we're now trying to have. This is something that's new to us. And we have a lot of sensitivities and other things that are keeping us from being able to really get into the weeds. That's why I love what Kareth does, because it breaks us through that. And then by bringing laughter and other components, all of those things are why I do what I do. So we're going to move on to round two. And then, when we're asking the questions, try to be as concise as you can while also hitting the points. I'm not going to read the whole breakdown prior to the questions. I think you all have read that, and I already gave a little bit of an introduction. But I will go into a couple of the questions and just invite you to pick one or more of those questions as you can see them on the screen. But the first one that I'm going to touch on, just as an example, is how much of an impact has the legacy of Reverend King had on your life? And it says as a blank person in the world. I'm saying as a Black person in the world. And the way I would answer that is when I grew up a kid going to church, I lived in the South, and probably about age 2 or 3 or 4, somewhere around there, I started realizing the distinctions that were being made between races. And my father and mother divorced, and my dad married a white person. And so I went back and forth between a white neighborhood with my dad and Black neighborhood with my mom. And there was some fluidity that happened for me because it was a natural part of my life. But I saw this invisible wall that existed between the communities. And it was a permeable wall for me, but not for those in the community where I spent the most time. And I just got really curious about it. And in the course of that curiosity, I came across Dr. King's message and saw how it ended for him, just like it ended for Malcolm X and Medgar Evers, that he was killed. And that spoke to me. It made me feel like this person died so that I can express myself, so I can discover myself, so I can speak my mind. And if I don't do those things, then that person died in vain. Not just Martin Luther King, but also Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, etc. And so I feel some sense of responsibility for how I show up in the world, knowing that many people gave their lives, put their lives on the line. My own family members, went through things in order for me to speak. So if I don't speak, then, what they put themselves out there for. So
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, Pedro, but I really think that what you're saying, it actually ties into the third question. which is about how Dr. King was martyred. And what influence do you think the threat of martyrdom has on keeping other people silenced in today's context? And maybe you could just kind of add on to that with the work that you're doing, because I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, I without going too far, because I want everybody else to have a chance to speak into whichever question hits their heart. But I do think that a lot of us get programmed by that martyrdom situation that happens to many people who speak up. Because you notice that when Malcolm X was speaking division, he actually was living, even though he was hated. But then when he started speaking about unity, that's when Malcolm X got killed, when he starts speaking about unity and oneness. And I think that there's some forces that do not want us to unify, to use that label of the organization I work with, don't want us to unify, because it's a threat to the existing systems. And so I think that that sense of that threat of, okay, if you say too many things, we're going to kill you, and then we'll give you a holiday and put us on statues later, um, is something that I think speaks and whispers into the hearts of many of us and keeps us from speaking our truths. So hopefully we are in a time where it isn't like a physical martyrdom, but even getting canceled and all those things are a form of martyrdom when people express themselves and aren't willing to have conversations. It's a social, psychological martyrdom. And I think as comedians, y'all probably know something about that.
Can
A little
I, can I,
bit, a little
can I,
bit.
can I dip in a little bit here?
Yeah.
So I'm afraid that the answers that I'm going to give are probably going to dip into some of the questions that you have set up. But you talking about modern, and then how things are getting canceled. Um, from my research and what I've learned, I come from a more harder, more abrasive way of looking at it. And I really don't think that much has changed since 1968, the death of Dr. King. If you look at it, anytime that we as a Black society start to come together and start to work in sync, or if this country sees that we are starting to make that come up, it gets shut down. I can give you so many examples, but I'll give you a couple. In the 80s, we were striving. We had Oprah, Arsenio, In Living Color. We had Cosby, and I'm saying Cosby's influence with A Different World. I don't know if you know it though, but when A Different World came out, Black colleges attendance, or more Black students or people went to college because of A Different World. Public Enemy. There were even rappers were talking about social injustice, and and Black folks are starting to come together. And even in rap music, we're saying, yeah, they had a chance, saying, you know what, we can do this ourselves. And once O.J. Simpson's got acquitted in 1993, it all got canceled. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's all gone now. And so now we're starting again back in the 1950s. We're losing Roe versus Wade, and civil rights was for white women. It did not help Black folks. So keeping it real and keeping it honest, like I said, a little more abrasive. And with my studying and understanding, we got a long way to go. And if you look at rap music now, it's all giving pride to shooting and killing and money. Not about educating, not about learning about ourselves, not about our bodies and health. It's all about, and what's, about having sex. Cardi B, they got a Grammy for WAP, a Grammy, saying this is good music. So what is the powers that be? What are the powers that be? The powers that be are saying to us, you're going to go but so far, and we're going to cut it off. And like I said, I'm not saying for my opinion, just look at history and look at that pattern.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can I just, I'm not sure even what question that this falls into, but it just came into my mind as you were speaking, Pedro, and as Wally was just saying. I am from, my parents are from Jamaica. I was born and raised in the United Kingdom. The issues that Black British, as they call us, face is different in degrees and in the way it's presented than the issues that are faced here by African Americans, only insofar as the way it's if you look at the packaging of it and the presentation of it, what's behind it all is exactly still the same issue, which is it seems as if there has been change, but the change is superficial or it's temporary. And so I tend to have that same kind of aggressive view of things, as you just said, Wally, in the sense of things are done to pacify us when we seem to be as a people united together to change anything. The laws that came, the changes that happened as a result of Dr. King, for instance, has been pretty much nullified, the effect of them. First of all, they've been limited. They've been limited to civil rights, which meant the right to vote, really, more than anything else. Because if you look at where power is wielded, which is economic power. And although that was one of the cornerstones and the pillars of what Dr. King was about, that part of it is seldom touched on. And the changes that needed to be made for that. It's like, okay, now we've been integrated, and like he said, he feared it's into a burning house. It does kind of look like that. I live here in Atlanta and came into contact with the kind of differences between the races that I had never experienced before. So although I'm used to racism and the kind of racism that we have in the United Kingdom, all the communities live side by side. We live on the same street. Our kids go to the same school. We never had segregation overtly, as the Jim Crow laws, for instance, but it was there just the same. So there were all these hidden things and social cultures and practices that work to reinforce the same agenda. And that agenda has never changed, which is to keep us in our place. And our place is in whichever hierarchy you're looking at, whether it comes to finances, economic, housing, it's to keep us satisfied with being, maybe, I don't even know that it's second-class citizens anymore. Maybe it's third class now. And it's not to say that Dr. King did not achieve and have a great impact on the society and Black people in the diaspora. It's to say that those things have been limited and restricted, and the differences that he was fighting against, the disconnect and the disrespect, has been repackaged in different ways, but it's still there. And so I feel like we need a different approach. And now I'm going to mention that question that you had there about Pedro, about whether there's anyone that we see who would take his place. And quite frankly, I don't know that we need one person to take his place. I think we need a group of people, a whole community, a whole, I don't know, 72 elders or something, so that if one gets knocked out, we replace him. So there's not just this one person on whom everything is hinged, and it can be used, whatever he says is used by the for and against arguments. Yeah, I kind of just, I know there's a lot of stuff in there that need to be teased out, but.
Yeah, Francis is like, you're about to say something.
Well, I mean, and I agree, wholeheartedly what, everyone has said. And I think that, to bring, the message of, Dr. King back in, it says bringing people through, constructive dialogue. And I think that piece is falling apart. We don't seem to do that. We have different, this group saying this group saying this is all within our own, community here. As you mentioned, Wally, the rap group and, their influence on, a certain segment and then so forth. But one of the things that I think we need to do is we need to bring, everyone together and really look at, it starts at education. And one of the things that Dr. King, he stressed that it may not have been in a lot of the lines that are quoted, but education was probably one of the most important things. And during that movement, and you talk about, Medgar Evers and so forth, the integration, because listen, they're saying we want the same opportunities that everyone has for education. And that is something that I think we've kind of, let go. We haven't demanded that the education system, regardless of where it is in different levels, it needs to start at the lower levels. We need to start educating our young, from the start, and having the same opportunities, the quality. One of the things that
Can I
I
interrupt you? I'm so sorry, Francis. I want you to delve a little bit deeper. When you say educating, what do you mean? That's very vague. What do you mean by educating?
I'm saying our educational system. Okay. I'm old enough to remember when the the question of educating different neighborhoods, the busing piece, that okay, we're going to be able to educate our young. We're going to be busing children all through different parts of the city, and how that really didn't work in a lot of areas. It may have worked in some, they were all different. But the key was the governments are not looking at the minority schools and so forth, and making sure they have the most up-to-date teachers, textbooks, the quality. I'm talking about the quality of education that we're starting out. And that's where I think that Dr. King was saying, number one, education, but he also says we want the same education starting from the beginning. And to drill down is, when we start school from first grade on, we want quality teachers, quality schools, textbooks, all the things that the other schools have, we need to have across the board. And I think if we can, as a group, we need to agree on, we need to at least start there, start educating, because to think that at some point that all of a sudden it's going to turn around and everyone's going to be equal, where some aren't going to be as educated as others. I was looking at some of the numbers of people that are graduating from high school, and they're saying that there's my numbers here, that about 42% of the kids that are graduating, and this is across the board, not just but can't read an eighth grade level. That is a national disgrace. And let's go to the next step. The people that, if we continue at this level, or at not so much the level, but the way we're doing things, we're going to be eclipsed by other nations.
Oh, we are. We already are.
I mean, we already are.
Like
Okay.
it's too late. Like
Okay.
we're past that point.
Yeah.
We're the dumbest country. We're one of the dumbest countries on the planet.
All right, great. We all agree on that. But I'm saying we need to try to change that. My whole point is, what are we going to do? We could sit there. Yep, we've already been eclipsed. We have to do something. Where can we start?
Well, we have to start with coming together. And that's what I think Dr. King was saying back in the day. And some people heard that, and some people thought, oh, this is a love, feel good, rainbows and unicorns situation. Mm-hmm. He was much deeper. And when he did go much deeper, that is when they took him out. And I'll be very frank, and I may say some very unpopular things here. I don't even know so much if what's going on today is a racial disparity as it is economic. Mm-hmm. And it is an attack on our society. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that there are powers that be. I mean, every great general knows, throughout the course of history, you want to stay in power. What do? You divide and conquer. Mm-hmm. And right now we are being divided at every possible facet. Yes. Men against women, toxic masculinity. Now there's toxic femininity, straight versus gay, cis versus trans, mm-hmm. Republican versus Democrat. We are being split on every level possible. And it is keeping us from what Dr. King's ultimate goal was. Now, there are some people who think, oh, well, he wanted to do it passively. I think personally, that was not true, first of all. But I also think that the restraint he had took more control and more power than being vitriolic. And I think that, one of the things I know, at least I do in my work, and Pedro, thank you for acknowledging it. I teach people how to have conversations, because people right now many people, I speak to corporations all across the country and the globe, actually. And a lot of people are DEI'd out because they've had it done the same way for a long time. The unconscious bias training. You're only diverse if you fit these qualifications. We're going to talk about inclusivity, but if you don't fit these qualifications, then you're really not part of the conversation. But you have to be enrolled in the conversation because you're the problem. Like, that's not working. It's not working. And it's why we have stuff that's happening like in Texas, where we have SB 17 that's been passed, where public schools can't have diversity officers anymore. They can't even use the word diversity because there's this overcorrection. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is what's happening. But that's a reaction to bad DEI. And so I'm trying to reel it back in and say, look, we got to have diversity. We got to have these conversations. Just because they haven't been doing it very well the past several decades doesn't mean it's not really important, and it's not something that we need to have present in our culture and have an awareness about. But we do need to reframe how we have these conversations so that we can enroll the people, especially the people in power, who need to understand, look, this is why people feel this way. This is why it's important to learn history, not to rehash it to make you feel bad and go sit in a corner and cry, but because we cannot repeat it, because it should not ever be allowed that we have people as second-class citizens.
But here's the thing. Some people enjoy where they are, and a lot of them don't want to change. So how are you going to get them to realize that they're better off if they change or when they change?
By plugging into what, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, what Zadie said, teaching people about their divinity. I lecture at Stanford Graduate School of Business annually, and I was honored to be invited to be a luminary for the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program. While I was there, and I apologize, I don't want to take up too much time, but while I was there speaking and introducing Inversity, there was a adjunct biology professor there, Michael Spector. He also writes for Newsweek. And he was there talking about DNA and gene editing. And I thought, oh, wow, this is the perfect person. So that when I go to my audiences and I'm taking the message of inversity of how we have more in common than we don't, he can give me a percentage, an actual percentage of how genetically close we are to one another. Yeah. I asked him, he goes, Kareth, we are 99.99986% the same.
The same.
I'm like, you're kidding. So in my mind, I'm thinking that 4/10,000ths of a percentage point that we aren't alike, like that's melanin content, that's hair texture, eye color, physical traits. He goes, Kareth, no. He goes, that's chromosomal anomalies. Like if someone has Down syndrome versus someone who doesn't. And we are fighting. We are causing wars and abusing and using and not recognizing people because we think we're so different over the most minute percentage of a point. And so if more people understood that, Wally, if more people could literally have it be comprehended in their brains, the people that I think are so different from me are not. And that means I'm worthy too. That means I am supposed to be here. That means I have purpose. We, society, especially in America, especially with the media, have done a phenomenal job of brainwashing people to think they're less than. And that is why people don't want to be.
Yep, or more than. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Sylvester, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful conversation, and I don't think anyone is wrong. I just really appreciate the fact that there appears to be an acknowledgement that in this group that that we have had some regression, right, in a lot of ways. And I want to remind, just for the purpose of this conversation, remind us that when Martin Luther King was assassinated, he was in Memphis protesting for sanitation workers.
Yes.
And he was there talking about not just racial justice, not just social justice, but also environmental justice and economic justice. And so I really do believe that that he would be. I want to respond to the question. In your opinion, what do you think Dr. King would say about where we are as a society today, presently? And I'd say he would be disappointed on multiple levels. I think he would be disappointed, particularly within the people of color community, is that we are very fragmented. We're very divided, and we have become a selfish society.
Mhm.
We have adopted many of the values that majority society held. And so we have begun to compete against each other
Yes,
as
yes.
opposed to working collectively for advancement. I also believe that he would be disappointed at the fact that there really has been lots of regression when it comes to economic justice. And to Francis' point, our educational system has really fallen apart. And we are in a place right now is the quality of education is based on your zip code. And that's an unfortunate reality that we all have to deal with because regardless, this is a global economy. And young people should be provided with the skills needed to compete in the global economy. Yet in today's society, the quality of your education is largely based on your zip code. And that's an unfortunate reality. And so I think he would be disappointed at the regression that is taking place in larger society, but also the fragmentation and the division that we have within people of color communities.
I would jump on that as well. I think that that is definitely the case. Um, one of the things that I kind of learned from my background, because my family comes from different places throughout the African diaspora. So my dad's from Cape Verde, and my mom was born in America, but then her family came from some other islands called Dominica. And so there was this division in our community where even though we were in the same, black neighborhood as everybody else, people would say to my mom's family that they were foreign, even though my mom was born in America, but they would treat her differently because her family came from a different country with black people. And the same with me. And with my name, people would say, well, Pedro, well, what are you? And I was like, what do you mean I'm black? And in their mind, they go, well, you're not black, black. And I'm like, what do you mean black, black? And they're like, well, you're not black, black with a name named Pedro. You must be some kind of Mexican. And that was literally they would say some kind of Mexican. And there was no education about how we have spread across the planet and the history that from which we emerged, which is a history that is filled with power, with invention, with creativity, with just so many dimensions of what it means to be human. And that we come from the cradle of civilization, and none of those things are taught. And so people limit themselves to the context that they're in. And then we try to align ourselves with power. So then there's this idea of like white adjacency. If white is good and white is right and da da da, then what is our adjacency to that? And that's the degree to which we have value. And I think having a broader sense of education, and also all of the other things that you all shared would give us a more enlightened version of what it means to be human. And also understanding that if we're all part of the human project, then we can learn from multiple histories, not to just further divide our history so that we treat histories as if they're in competition with one another, but to approach it more scientifically, where the more information we have, the broader sense of reality we have, the better decisions we can make, all of these things. So, yeah, I agree with everything that everyone's saying. And the degradation of it is just crazy to behold. It's crazy to behold. I saw out there in Texas, where some of you, a couple of y'all are from, last year. I saw they had a twerk for freedom contest for Martin Luther King Day.
No, no.
Stop lying.
Yes,
Stop lying.
I'm telling you the truth. A twerk for freedom, and I was like, oh no, this dude would more than roll. He wouldn't just roll over in his grave. He would try to go back
He would
and
get
not be
up.
born.
Get up.
Cartwheels.
He would get up. He would get up out of that grave. I think for me, I just love everything that's being said here, and obviously we're just touching on things, just really just touching on stuff and moving on. There's so much that needs addressing. But the whole issue of education starts with, what is education? I am not so sure that it's beneficial for any of us. It really doesn't even matter what race right now, but certainly for people of color, for Black people. Being educated into the systems as they are now, the educational system, what are we being educated into? You know what I mean? It's like, what's behind it? What's the purpose of it? What's the content of it? The quality of the education. So it's great to think that, yes, we start with education, but I think we have to understand what we mean by education. I think we have to be clear in our minds the quality, the content, and the purpose of education. It seems to me that it's not necessarily, as things are set up and have been for the longest, it's been about training us to think in a particular narrow way that will suit the way in which we're funneled into the professions or into the labor force more than it is anything else. And for me, that's not education, and that's not the education that we should be. So if we get the opportunity to start again, I think we need to start with defining education itself. I mean, we're all here. There is so much that we don't even know about ourselves. Never mind to be able to understand our history, like you were just talking about, Pedro, where we're coming from, and this human project, and understanding that we all have a place in it, maintaining the dignity of being a human being. And when we don't even understand that we are, each and every single one of us, entitled to and are that. We should start from a place of understanding that we were made in the image of God, and that we should start from a place of excellence within ourselves, and that the things that are separating us are there to serve an agenda which is not consistent with and true to being a human being. We're being trained to be slaves and robots and automatons and throwaway chattels and all this other kind of stuff. So when we talk about education, we really need to get back to basics to understand, what do we mean by education? And for us as a people, understanding what the educational systems in the diaspora, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in the European nations, what their education system has done to us is deprive us and continue to deprive us of the fullness of our identity, the wholeness of person that we should be in all areas of life, and then beyond that, the higher nature that we're aspiring to. So yes, education is perhaps the starting point, but what education are we talking about?
Yeah, Zadie, I really appreciate that point. I guess for me, when I think about education and and I'll say the disparity based on zip code, is the basic reading, writing, and arithmetic that young people need to even decide if they want to, or what career track they want to pursue, right? And so when I think about that, I think about, the making sure that our young people can read, and that they can comprehend, and that they can compute and add and reason, so that we are at least preparing them to launch into adulthood. And so when I think about education, I'm thinking about the basic things that are really, really important, and really have allowed each of us, right, to be where we are today, right? Regardless. And I, love what Wally talked about, and his mom, and making sure that he didn't have any regrets, and Kareth and everybody, right? All of us, have a basic understanding. And Pedro sent out the note, and we were all able to read it and comprehend it. And as a result, we were able to show up here today and to contribute to this wonderful conversation. The basic stuff. I did some teaching some time ago, and I said to the young people, I said, education is really understanding how to think.
Mm.
Critical
Not
It's,
thinking.
what to think.
that's it right there.
Critical thinking.
That,
Yeah.
yep, that's
The
it right
critical
there.
thinking. But if you don't have the reading and the writing and the reasoning that is foundational and fundamental to that, you will never get to that point. So that's what I'm thinking about, the fundamentals, so that they can get to the point where they know how to think, and somebody else is not telling them what's important and what should be important. And so those are the things that I think about, that
And
we must
If I could
value
piggyback,
forward.
yeah,
if I could piggyback on what you're saying, Sylvester. So as a mother, like, Pedro, we could probably have the youngest children here, I'm assuming.
Mm.
I have a sixth grader and a fourth grader. I see, like, right now what is happening with the education system, and I am in a very affluent suburb. Like, I'm very fortunate. Even with that being the case, we homeschool, and one of them is in a private Montessori school. Because even with this being one of the top school districts in the country, you have got classrooms full of children with ADD, ADHD, on the spectrum. Teachers only able to give a certain amount of attention because they've got kids who need more. I mean, it's kind of out of control. And then we're not even throwing in now, especially with communities that have less access and less money, the dietary issues that are happening. I mean, what's going on with red dye 40? I mean, it's poison what these children are getting, and they cannot think properly. We're not talking about, and I'm not here to like have a big debate about vaccines, but like all of the things that we are putting into our bodies, from food to medicine to the clothing that we wear. I have very fortunate. I have a naturopath from Harlem who's like, look, if you can only afford to buy organic underwear and sheets, please do, because everything else has chemicals that are your skin is your largest organ. Like, these are things we don't think about and the impact they have. So it's not just about a system of education. It's about everything that we are taking in, the music, the entertainment, like all of that affects our energy and how we think about ourselves, how we feel physically, mentally, spiritually. That is what Dr. King, I really feel like if he were still here, would be talking about right now.
I think Dr. King definitely would be talking about, and I think that was the reason for his demise, was economics. He wanted to train Black folks to understand that understanding money and how money works will definitely drive us forward. The bus boycott, when that bus company realized they weren't making any money, that's when things changed. And I have a dream speech, and he said that it was more of a nightmare because he was naively optimistic. It was just some beautiful words, but he realized that it's about money. I don't know if you guys know this though, but he was going to run for office, and that got out too. And he was like one of the most listened to and most affluent people that was going on in the 60s. And so people were turning, white people too, were turning their heads towards him.
Absolutely.
He was becoming more and more powerful. So, we have to really, really, like I said, like I study, like as a hobby, I study African American studies, but real history, really dig into, why did they get rid of this man? Not to the fact that, he was, making noise or whatever. No, he was very, very smart. And he knew, and when he hooked up with Malcolm, and he kind of shifted a little bit when Malcolm, him and Malcolm got together. So, he was getting there. And like I said, it's like once Black folks, we start getting the momentum, it gets cut off. I mean, Black Panthers were not, and we all know this, they were not a radical group of people, or terrorists. No, they were basically protecting Black folks. They're the ones that started the breakfast program. you know, for underprivileged poor kids, and they started the whole the homeschooling thing. They started that for Black kids, and so they were
They
getting
started paramedics, the
yes,
paramedic system
yes,
that we
and
have now.
yes, and so the government was seeing that they were getting more and more popular. That's why, you know, there's, you know, the NRA, and that's why all that stuff happened, because these Black Panthers, they were armed, and all they were doing was protecting us. They were protecting ours. And so the government got in, white folks got in and said, you know what, they're becoming too powerful. And you can see the pattern. If you guys I hate saying it's so cliche, but do the research. But if you do that, I hate that term. But I mean, you can Google it, you know, you can see the pattern.
Can you still Google it, or has that been, like, you know, shadow banned?
Say it again.
Talking about, I said, can you still Google that, or has it been shadow banned? I
No,
mean,
you can Google
history
that.
is being
Google Black Panthers. Black Panther started. It was more women than men, believe it or not. Black Panther started with women, and so
that's interesting. I did
I'm
not know
telling
that.
you guys, man, it's so interesting. Like, you know, once you kind of get past that, you know, I have a dream, blah blah blah, and really get into what these people are all about, you're like, oh wow, and your eyes become wider and wider, and it's just fascinating. This whole thing.
And hence, Wally, if I could just jump in and say, continuing about the point of education, it's that you have taken control of your education. Mm-hmm. That's education. It's not just we need the basics, as Sylvester was pointing out. We need all the basics, but we're not taught to reason for ourselves, to critically look at the information we're presented with.
Right.
You start doing that in class, you know, I remember being 13 years old and writing something, and was told, quite frankly, that I had not the right to be critical of certain philosophies that were being presented in a class. Like, how dare you? We experienced that, Pedro. I know you have, and we've experienced that in church even. You remember being quite young in church and just asking a very simple and quite innocent kind of question, but you know, who's God's father? I mean, you know, just simple things you would ask,
right,
about what was being taught in church. And as a child, of course, with your curiosity and everything, you ask questions. And you would be shut up, like, don't you dare ask those questions. And it's the same kind of way in which the system tries to educate us and to keep us boxed in this box of education here, which only applies here when we're in institutions of learning. And you mustn't think outside of that box. I'm going to say one last thing, which I think is I think Dr. King used it was a strategy and a tactic rather than it was a way of life. At least that's what I think. That's very personal, and maybe I don't have much to back it up, but I think it was a strategy, because in his research, Wally, he had found that was one of the most effective ways to gain what he wanted at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, because he read Thoreau and Gandhi's Satyagraha,
exactly.
And he put those together and said, this is the most effective means to get to where we want to be. And so he employed it strategically. And I think that's something important to learn. I'll throw out one anecdote about teaching or education that I want to hear from Francis, because he got us on the education train, and it's been going on that train for a while. I tried, when I got out of the military, I tried to be a teacher, and I started out being a substitute in the same community that I went to school in, which was lacking in many ways. And I was substitute to my own teacher who didn't remember me. And when I came into the classroom, I was like, oh yeah, I'm the substitute. And you would think with my name, she would remember me, and because she was a Spanish teacher and Latin teacher, but she didn't. And she said to me, don't bother trying to teach these kids because they can't learn. Just keep them out of the hallways.
There you go.
And that's how she, as a substitute. So then she left, and then she came back, and the kids were learning. And she said, you must have a special way with kids that they're all learning. And I said, I just didn't assume that they couldn't learn. Right. And then she looked like shocked. And then I asked her if she remembered me, and she was like, no. And I was like, okay. And I decided then I didn't want to teach out in the public school system after a couple of instances like that. And I started thinking I needed to teach adults somehow to transform the way they approach life. And that's what ultimately led to me being a pastor. But then I realized that institutionally, that is also embedded with a lot of the same things. And so now, we're doing what we're doing. But Francis, I just to throw the education thing about there, you set us on this train. Did any of it land where your passion was?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to take and give like just a 2 minute on some of the things I'm doing on the education front. Um, I'm a pilot. I was a pilot in the military and I work with a group of individuals now, Virtual Flight Academy. We are starting to teach on simulators at 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. We're actually emulating a program that China uses. China right now teaches all their, pilots, so forth, starting in 7th, 8th grade. We don't do that. Well, they're doing it now. We've been doing this for a number of years. And we're working with, and what I was involved with down in Mississippi and Alabama, giving the opportunity to potential pilots that would never ever get the opportunity. And what we're doing is we're going in working with the junior ROTC program. Fast forward, there's a basic entry level exam that we need to. There's a lot of people want to fly planes, but we're finding that about 75% of the people that want to do it can't pass the initial test because reading, okay, math. There's a good bit of math in flying. This is basic stuff. And the good thing about this is we've put together a syllabus now that we're going back to the education system saying, beef these children up on these areas. They can do it. They could potentially down the road because they're young enough. Here we are training, pilots at 21, 22, and others are starting to do it at 12 and 13. Big difference. So what we're trying to do, the whole point is if you teach them the basics or having them have the basics coming in, and someone brought up the critical thinking. There's critical thinking that is needed in the different areas and haptics that you need to be able to say fly any kind of aircraft. And all of a sudden now, one of the things we're getting, about 65% of our either the African American, but there's more females. We're putting more females now in that pipeline because females were told, oh, you can't fly airplanes. It's the same thing that told my uncle, who's a Tuskegee Airman, blacks can't fly airplanes. And so what we're trying to do is we need, when you say the education piece, that's why I say we got to start that at the bottom here, okay? And the basic, the reading, writing, arithmetic, piece. But the next step in that is the critical thinking that is going to allow them to prosper. So within the next 8 to 10 years, we hope to see this, a greater number of minorities in the cockpits that are qualified to do it. You just can't just decide to put someone in that cockpit to do it because you have to be trained. You have to have the basics. So that's my thing. That's what we're doing, in our part to do this. Not being, educators as you mentioned, Pedro, in a classroom where this is a specialized piece.
That's awesome, though.
Pedro, can I ask Francis a question?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So, Francis, I really appreciate what you just shared, and you talked about the females and how they are kind of being prepared for it. So when I have two children, I have a daughter that is 24. She's a nurse now, a son who's 21, and he's in his third year of college. And when my son was born, I began to read all of these books, about raising a Black boy and all of this, right? And so one of the things that I learned is that there is, in a lot of cases, uh, that the educational system is designed for females. the very makeup of it, the fact that you're expected to sit and be lectured to, and just the number of females in the classroom versus the number of males, and they talk about that. And so we began to do things with my son to help to really supplement what he was learning in the school. So are you finding that is there any research out there that says that the educational system is designed for females versus males?
That's above my pay grade. I can't answer that one.
May I?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm someone who attended a women's college.
Okay.
And I'm extremely grateful that I did. I am such an advocate for single sex schools, which I never thought I would have been, especially when I was a student. I'm like, no, of course I want to be with boys. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. My brother went to an all boys college preparatory school. He went to Jesuit here in Dallas. What you just spoke to, Sylvester, is something that Jordan Peterson talks about a lot and has gotten a lot of blowback on. Because, when you have remember I said toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, feminism, there are people saying, well, no, men and women are equal. Biologically, our brains do work differently.
Yeah.
There's nobody saying women can't be astrophysicists and excel in STEM, but we do have a different way of approaching and thinking. I mean, look at any married couple. That's straight heterosexual married couple. The arguments that ensue, saying the same exact thing, but because we're saying it differently, because it registers in one person's mind differently than it does the other. I mean, it's just facts. It's biology and it's facts. And I think it would be something that we should really actually pay attention to, especially for younger children who we do want to have the path to success lined out. We do want to have the path for critical thinking laid before them so that they don't feel like, oh, I'm not good enough, or there's some deficit, because their brains operate in a different way. I know that was the case for me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say
Awesome.
I'm gonna say one quick thing. We've found out though that as far as the females, they do better with female instructors than they do the male. And even though they're trained, these are some Air Force types that have come in, that they respond better to a female instructor. So what we try to mix it up, not just try to segregate it. We try to mix it up, but we found out that some actually learn faster, have a better grasp of what they're doing by looking at that female role model. So
yeah.
So
Can I just-
we're
Yeah.
almost at time, so I want to be able
Oh.
to be mindful of that. But I will say that it's funny that we started out with Martin Luther King and integration, and we're ending on segregation, on male female segregation. What we went
Irony.
for?
Irony.
Well, I
The
think
irony.
the beauty in this, Pedro, and hopefully this is a takeaway for others, is that we're talking about Martin Luther King and what he would think about today, and certainly Francis took us to education. And so what my takeaway is that in order for us to have both males and females to succeed academically, we need to understand their academic needs and how they learn. And in some cases, even who is most equipped to be their instructors, so that they will actually excel academically. And so, yeah, just as a silver lining in this conversation, I'll add.
May I just add to that the fact that perhaps it's also, if we spread that out a little bit, to take note of the fact that in terms of Black people in the society, what also needs to be taken on board is that just having opportunities is not sufficient to change things.
Right.
Access to an opportunities, but that we need positive measures which takes into account that we will learn differently, that we're coming from different backgrounds, that we have different resources available to us. And if that's taken into account when we talk about equality, and when we talk about economic parity, when we talk about making progress within society is what's seen to be progress, that in the same way, though, those kind of things should be taken into the calculation of how to make those things a reality.
Awesome. So I'm gonna let that be Sylvester and Zadie's final word as we close out. And this is round 3, just like a reflection and next steps. Like, what's something meaningful that y'all think happened today? The questions are in the document, but just 1 minute to say a final word as we start this conversation. Doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. Maybe we might even become a show. Who knows? But but yeah, just let's have a final word from Kareth, Wally, and Francis, and then I'll close us out, and then we'll see where we are.
Well, I think in summary, this was such a full discussion. It was such a full conversation. Obviously, we could never touch on all of the greatness of Dr. King. We could never touch on all of the issues that were happening back then or today. But I think that this conversation, this discussion, it was civil discourse at its best, which was what Dr. King was striving for as well. And just us being able to broach the topics and know that there's so much more that needs to be done and so much more behind it. I think this was a great way to honor him and his legacy.
Awesome.
I love conversations like this. I call them brain buffets, because people have their own dishes that they bring to the table. And Francis, Sylvester, you said some things and like, oh, I'm gonna take a little bit of that, and you said, oh, I'm gonna take a little bit of that, and that nourishes me and my mind. So I love these brain buffets. So keep this up, Pedro. Good idea. Keep it going. And because I'm always hungry. I'm always hungry to learn.
Awesome.
I just wanted to say that, loved it. It was a great conversation. Learned a lot of, from everyone here. But I think one of the things about a walk away, we actually talked about, issues in relations to Dr. King and what his legacy is, but we didn't get political.
Right.
We actually focused on issues that are all kind of germane to us and our people and so forth. And we didn't let the politics invade, which wish we could have more of those kind of conversations.
So, and Zadie and Sylvester, if you can say it in like 45 seconds, y'all, I'll have a chance.
I will just end with just one thing that I appreciate and love having been here on this in this conversation, this living room conversation with you all. But just to close out by saying that quoting from Dr. King, actually, fierce urgency of now. Like, can we continue doing this, please? Now, let's not drop the ball now.
Right.
Yeah, let me just say, one, Pedro, thank you for organizing and coordinating this. Really loved the conversation, really loved just meeting and hearing all of you. That's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, I really love what Wally said about the buffet, because that's so important. And it really is a great way of describing diversity of thought, diversity of, perspective. And I love that as well. I'm going to borrow that, Wally, and you might hear that again. And the third thing is, as we reflect back on 2020, when, all of us were social distancing and we were, required to work from home, many of us became very acquainted with Zoom. And I would say that this conversation today happened because 2020 happened. Had we not had that, we wouldn't understand the value and the importance and the richness that could come from this virtual conversation. And so I just want to say that we have enjoyed this because we had 2020.
Awesome. That's a good way to end. And I'll just say thank you for each of you. Thank you for Living Room Conversations, for setting up this structure. Thank you for Unify, for giving me a space where I can talk about the things that I care about. And thanks to all of you. And in a future conversation, if we choose to do this again, we need to talk about the comedy and its role in expansion. We got some comedians up here, and I know that Dr. King had a sense of humor. I've read he had a hilarious sense of humor, and so we need to maybe talk about how we can laugh our way into that next stage. So appreciate everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care.
Thank you
Nice
for your
meeting you.
time.
Bye, all. Thank you.